Scott Baxter, who is a neighbor at West Mattheson Park.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here.
We're going to talk about West Mattheson Park today.
Good.
We're going to talk about your relationship with West Mattheson Park. To give some context for, there's some big changes coming to West Mattheson Park.
Big changes, not necessarily good changes.
Yes. Would you tell me about West Mattheson Park? What part of town are we talking about?
West Mattheson Park is a small park, borders Coral Gables and technically South Miami, I believe, to the west side of Old Cutler Road in the southern end of Miami. It's been there. I'm born and raised here. I can't tell you how long it's actually been there. It's been there longer than I have, and I'm not sure I'm going to admit how old I am at the moment, but many decades. Let's just leave it at many decades. And it's one of, if not the only last unstructured, semi-wild parks in Miami where one can go and just enjoy nature.
To cut to the chase, the county wants to spend $5 million. We've heard the figure has changed, but it seems to us that it's about $5 to $6 million making some changes to the park. Could you describe for us what those proposed changes are?
The changes start off with a boardwalk. It's going to be a beautiful boardwalk right through an endangered forest over endangered plants that their own Department of Environmental Regulation has told them that they're not supposed to pave over, which, okay, they're not paving, they're building a boardwalk. I'm not sure where the difference is there. Same thing, we're covering up the plants. They're going to block off the main access to the park down Schoolhouse Road, which has been there since I was a child. I'm going to go back to that. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago that was. They're going to block that off, not allow anybody to access that. And instead, you now get to traipse down. It's either a third or a half of a mile boardwalk through woods that the Coral Gables police have had problems and issues and attacks in to get out to this park and end up in the middle of no place.
I want to go into the political reasons behind this because I think it's so striking that at this time of budget crisis, this time of COVID, why are we messing with this park? There seems to be some indications that there are, to get into the specifics, the entrance to West Mattheson, the most convenient access point, is behind the gate at Hammock Lake's gated community.
Correct.
And how many years ago did they put up that gatehouse?
I want to say 9 years ago.
Yeah, I thought it was 8 or 9 years ago. Yeah. So the idea is, it seems that there is some political pressure from that community to stop traffic coming in through the gate to access the park.
The gate went up, like I say, about 9 years ago, off the top of my head. And yes, and it immediately became, every time you went through that gate, where are you going? What are you doing? Now, let's keep in mind, this is a public road. They put a gatehouse on it, but it's not their road.
Right.
But every car that came through there, unless they knew you, unless you had a pass, you were asked where you were going and what you were doing.
Right.
Kind of a form of intimidation right there. I mean, the first time they asked me, I was a little startled. Like, excuse me, what? I'm going down here to the county park.
On a public road.
On a public road in my vehicle. You know, what's the question and why? I'm not sure here. Since then, they've gotten even more, I hate to say militant about it, but militant about it. And now it's to the point where they don't want us entering through there. They don't want us.
And they seem to have convinced people at the county that this is a bad idea to have the neighbors from Schoolhouse Road and Coral Gables and the surrounding community use that access. I'd like to ask about, one of the interesting issues here is the county seems to be taking the position that that's not a legitimate entrance, that somehow this is a service road. Based on the history of it, I mean, obviously this entrance has always been open.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any legitimacy to? Is there any reason besides people in Hammock Lakes wanting this closed that they would close this side? Has the county proffered any reason why they want to make people go through another entrance?
Not that I'm aware of. And it has been as long as I've been going there, which is a few decades. Those gates have been open dawn to dusk, just like any other park. And that is the entrance to that park. It's the main entrance to the park. That's how you get in. And they've always treated it as such. They have a guy comes out every morning, he opens the gate. They have a guy come out every night and he closes the gate. Same thing they do at Mattheson East if you're going to the boat ramp.
It's interesting because I think on so many levels, this is like it's like troubling from a government standpoint because it's a huge amount of money. Like when I hear $6 million for a board, I understand it's a boardwalk. It's some repairs to a handicap parking lot on that side.
Some repairs to a handicap parking lot on that side, and they are talking about building in a small dog park in the center of it, a structured dog park
for $6 million or $5 million.
Yes, we're all in the wrong business, but anyway, sorry.
It just seems incredible, and it's interesting for me because I'm a boater, and I go to East Mattheson Park, and there are still visible damage from prior hurricanes.
Sure.
And instead of using the money to repair things, they're putting in a boardwalk that seems to be overwhelmingly opposed by park users. Which brings me to the question I always talk about. Reasonable people can disagree, right? Somebody could say, I think it's a great idea. Let's shut this entrance that everyone uses. Let's make them and handicapped people go to a faraway entrance and go down a long boardwalk, right? I mean, it may not make sense to you and I, but it could make sense to somebody, right? We can disagree about that. But it seems like what we can agree on what the process should look like, right? What that decision-making should look like. Not to be a smart aleck, but I'm assuming the county has not done a great job of outreaching to neighbors and polling people and asking, what do you want? How do you use the park?
Oh, they did a wonderful job of it. See, that's where you're wrong. In 2008, they reached out to everybody and said, we want to turn this into a beautiful park, completely structured. We're going to build a high rise, whatever their plan was. And the neighbors all said, nope, you're not.
They said, absolutely not. You're right.
Not.
They did reach out. I appreciate the correction. The residents did respond, and they responded overwhelmingly. I have an 8-year-old, and I always say we joke around with each other. And no, it's not. It's not that I don't like the. I mean, I don't like the. It's not that I don't like the idea. It's that I hate the idea. Right?
That's what they were told. But wait, it gets better. They did the same thing again in 2015 because they figured, hey, new whatever, we're going to try this again. They got the same reaction from your 8-year-old. Exact same reaction.
It's not that I don't like it. It's that I hate it.
Right. Everybody hated it. Nobody wants it. It doesn't suit the park. It's one of the last untouched pieces of parkland in the county. It doesn't suit what's there. It doesn't suit what the people use it for. People go out there. They're playing with their dogs. They're practicing yoga. They're jogging through the woods. None of what they want to do fits what this park is good for. And to go back to, it's the last untouched park in the county. Leave it alone. The neighbors overwhelmingly said, leave it alone. So two strikes.
It's interesting because it's like we have this epidemic. When you're in law school, there was a lot of laws were structured for development of land. And for example, adverse possession. If you don't do something with your land, and I do for 7 years, I can take your land away from you. The idea was we don't want fallow land. And it's interesting seeing what the park's doing because it's like it's like they can't stand the idea that this is what it was almost 100 years ago when the Mathesons gave it. It's a piece of green space unstructured, untouched, that people can enjoy and go walk in a field. And it's like the county can't stand that idea. We've got to put structure to this. Do you think there's something inherent, or is it more nefarious? Is this a politically driven thing? Because we're spending $5 million, which it seems like we could use. I mean, right next door, we have Chapman Field Park, which I want to talk about, which is a non-functioning park that could sure as heck use $5 million. But we're using it to fix a problem that seems like the community says doesn't exist.
I really, in my heart, believe it's more political. I believe that the HOA in the area and is leaned on the county and their connections with the county, and they are pushing to have this done in order to close off their entire neighborhood to anybody who might possibly pass through it. They don't want anybody going through it. It's a way for them to totally privatize their road without actually privatizing the road and having to take over the maintenance and everything else on the road.
They eliminate the problem of the neighbors from Schoolhouse Road coming through.
Mm-hmm.
They shut an entrance, permanently close an entrance to the park that's been open for, not to get how old you are, but you look like you're over 50 years old.
I'm over 50. We'll go with that. We'll go with over 50. I'm good with that.
50 years, that entrance has been open. So
and I can say I've been going there for 50 years, actually, and still not tell you.
So we closed that entrance, and a lot of people use that park that cannot make the walk. Like I hate to, it almost angers you when you think of the people that use the park. They're making these changes and they're making it inaccessible for people that use the park. I mean, I've been there early in the morning, and there are elderly people who go that will simply, under the new regime, if this happens, will simply not be able to use the park.
Right.
Am I off on that?
No, you're not. There are people that aren't going to be able to make that walk in and out. Some won't even make it in, but you double that walk, and depending upon who you ask, it's 0.3 of a mile or 0.5 of a mile. Whatever it is, it's double because you have to go in and out. There are people that can't physically make that walk, and all that does is get you to the far end of the path. That doesn't even really get you into the park. You're at the far end of the path in the southernmost corner of the park. To get to the rest of the park, you're looking at another 3 to 0.5 of a mile to get into the main part of the park. Not everybody's going to do a total of a 2-mile walk just to go in and out. Not everybody can physically do that.
I think that's the most upsetting thing is the access issues. I think that we're in a time of pandemic. We're in a time where we need to be focusing on people's mental health, and that you neighbors are having to fight to stop a waste of money, to stop a closure of a park. It's just like the exact wrong time to be doing this. And I want to please anyone have comments. Tommy, would you put the comments up for us so I can go through? No problem. Please write us any questions you have. We'll try to address them. Right next door is Chapman Field Park. Mm-hmm. And there's a push to get Chapman Field functional. It's a non-functional park. You can't go there. You can't spend time there. There's everything's overgrown. How does the community feel about this idea of using the $5 million to build this boardwalk and make these improvements versus, like, if I lived by Chapman Field, I would be very upset about why is that money? Like, I have a non-functioning park. At least those guys over at West Mattheson have a park.
You should be very upset, because not only do you have a non-functioning park that was one of the centers of baseball and softball in Miami for years and years and years, you have a park that is polluted. That's why they closed the park. It's polluted. The grounds are dangerous. They found out that our kids were sliding in
arsenic and
land, arsenic and basically arsenic. Same problems they had at Merry Christmas Park, actually. And we should all be highly upset about that. Not only have we taken away the baseball parks from our children, we've taken away the soccer field that was there from our children, who already are having a hard enough time getting out when they're allowed to get out, getting out to play. And you also have everybody around that area is living in contaminated air. It should be cleaned up, dealt with immediately. They're still putting this off. You can't put off Chapman Field because somebody wants to build a boardwalk in another park in order to appease a homeowners association and privatize the road for them. That's totally wrong.
It's interesting. I've been involved in these fights before, and some of the most vehement fights are the fights between the upper class and the upper middle class, or wealthy neighborhoods. I've seen it on golf courses. I've seen it. And this smacks a little bit of that same feeling where it's like, we got to close this entrance to keep the riffraff off of Schoolhouse Road out of our neighborhood.
I've been called worse.
And it has a little bit of feeling of that. But just from a purely government, like good governance standpoint, like I have not personally seen an explanation from the Parks Department. I have not seen an explanation from the elected representatives. I have not seen an explanation of like why this is a good idea. Like if I ask you today, what Maria Nardi was on the other day with Grant Miller in and presented their side of the issue. If you had to describe the Parks Department's position, what would you say?
I can't say that right this second.
Yeah, we are a G-rated show.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep this as politically correct as I can.
But I
way to phrase this. But what I heard and what I've seen in my communications with them, and what I heard the other day, is garbage. They haven't come up with, and you pointed it out exactly, they haven't come up with a logical reason to spend money when people have been begging them to fix the ballparks and everything at Chapman. And well, we're not going to do that because we want to do this other park that nobody wants done. They haven't come up with a logical reason for that.
But I think that what was upsetting to me was it seemed to me that what they're saying is, no, the residents want this. Like that seems to be the park's position.
Well, yeah, in a way, I guess it is, but I
know it's not true, but it seems like
some residents do apparently.
But there's this
five on the street on the way into it. Apparently, that's
the ones whose property values are going to go up when you shut this all down.
Potential campaign donors, you don't want to mess with them.
I think that to me is where the breakdown happens. Again, I go to that thing of like when I do a lot of this as a lawyer, and when I go into a room. You can be in Little Haiti and there's a big project and there's a lot of different constituencies. You have the developer who wants to build this. You have the hotel union. We want this. We need jobs. You have the city. This is going to increase revenues. You have the residents. We're going to get displaced. We're not going to be able to live in our neighborhood anymore. And there's all these constituents. And it's like you get them in a room and you have a discussion. Right. And someone's going to leave unhappy. Someone's may leave happy, but it's going to happen. It all gets out, right? People are at the microphone. They're screaming. They're yelling. They're fighting for what they believe in. And I think that's one of the things that I've felt in this process is that hasn't happened, right? The county is avoiding that process because it would be very interesting to see on the one hand, who's advocating for this and on the other side, everyone else who's against it. And I think that's the breakdown of it, it would be very interesting to see the residents that don't live within Hammock Lakes that want this to happen. Right. like it's like who wants to close entrances to parks? Who's advocating for that, right? It almost strikes you as it's just not believable, right? It's like who wants to close access to parks? We want more access. Who wants those old people that are there at 7 a.m. to not be able to go to parks anymore? But that's what they're advocating for. And the county, Julie Pikowski, just wrote in about, we need transparency. And she points out that there's a petition of 2,000 people. That petition just started
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
2,500 signatures, I believe it is now.
Close to 2,500 signatures on this saying we don't want this. And so, it's going to be interesting to see the response of the politicians because everyone's kind of avoided, I think, coming to the table and explaining the position, right? I mean, I think that it would be, again, I go back to like, what's the countervailing thing, right? There's a lot of things I oppose, but there's someone on the other side that is not making money who thinks that it's the right thing to do. And that's not happening here. And I don't know. I think the thing that the residents are so frustrated about is how do you make that process happen, right? There was like, it's hard to keep a straight face when you say there were 2 meetings, 2008, 2015. Think about how that neighborhood's changed since those meetings. Think about how much the world has changed in the middle of a pandemic. And we're just careening toward this park's going to close next month, right?
Yeah.
Next month, it's going to close and this money's going to get spent, which is just, it's almost hard to believe. It's hard to believe that they've done it. As far as the ADA stuff goes, have they addressed the concerns? Has there been accessibility studies done? Has the county addressed those issues?
They won't tell us. They won't tell us what studies they've done. They won't tell us if Durham has finally signed off on the project, which we have emails from Durham saying, what, you're doing what? Excuse me, you can't do that.
This doesn't make
not good, bad juju here. The county refuses to tell us what studies have been done. ADA is a huge consideration. The ongoing cost of the park. Let's go back to the boardwalk. So there's a concept of the boardwalk being used for ADA access. So what does that mean? We're going to have somebody on a golf cart who's going to take people in who can't walk. Okay, so where's that person going to sit during the day in August in the golf cart, waiting for somebody to show up when you don't have that many people there every day? It's not a heavily used park. So you're going to pay somebody 13 hours a day during daylight savings time, dawn to dusk, to sit there in a golf cart. Is that person certified? If something happens to a handicapped person in the golf cart, how are they going to get them in and out of the golf cart? So now you have to have specialized people there to mandate that. I mean, this whole thing hasn't been thought through.
And it's interesting you say, because we were talking about what you do in your private life, and you're involved in the construction industry. And I'll never forget, my father was a general contractor, and I remember one time, a customer wanted to paint concrete, like a concrete driveway, and I remember my father saying, like, always remember when you do an improvement, there's a maintenance cost. So he was telling the person, like, I'm happy to paint this for you, but do know that like every 5 years, I'm going to be back here pressure washing it, scraping off the old paint and repainting it. Because once you paint it, you've made a commitment.
I have the equipment for him to do that job. Just
there you go.
Small plug there.
And the person decided to do it, but my dad just felt the need to say, like, this is you are now taking on a cost that you otherwise wouldn't have taken on. And I always think about that with the city, because the the government, municipal governments seem to be, they're good at building things. They're not good at maintaining them, right? The cycle is build it, neglect it, the roof caves in, ergo the playhouse, and then let's tear it all down and start all over again. Like, we're good at building stuff. And this kind of has this feeling of like, I've been to the park, like, what is that on a rainy July, end of the month? What is that boardwalk going to look like? Like, is it going to just be covered in leaves and mess and slippery? Mm-hmm. Like, it's just like, who's going to clean the boardwalk? It just seems like we're taking on just more expenses.
Yeah. I probably shouldn't say this, but they're actually creating jobs, which may not be a bad thing in today's economy.
Yeah.
But is that the whole point of spending $6 million to create 3 jobs? Yes, you're correct. They're going to have to clean the boardwalk. They're going to have to maintain the boardwalk. What are they building the boardwalk out of? How often does it have to be replaced? All of this, it's just, they're heading down a road that they haven't fully thought out. Back to, once you're in there, well, technically ADA requires restrooms. Where are they going to put the restrooms? There's no restrooms on the plans.
Yeah, Lynn Stewart Mitchell wrote that in. I think she's, actually Lynn raises a lot of good issues about restrooms. Does this improvement require building a restroom? There is no restroom in the plans. And it's interesting too. She says, based on the signs, they want to install 111 parking spaces. What does that do to the environment?
Oh, pavement doesn't hurt anything. Don't worry about it. Just ask the county; they'll tell you.
So we're gonna close this part of the entrance. Then we have to make up for that. We have to build 111 parking spaces.
We have to pave alongside of an endangered mahogany forest. Yes, sir. We're going to go ahead and pave that, but it's okay. It's only asphalt. Doesn't hurt anything.
Debbie Perez says, boardwalk. She agrees with me. Boardwalk will become slippery with algae and leaves, but for this maintenance, and we know that Miami-Dade is great at maintaining parks. Right.
The business side of me says I hope it does because I can sell them the equipment to clean it, but it's going to be constant maintenance, and I happen to sell that equipment. I know what they're going to need to keep it and maintain it properly. We're talking thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Oh yeah, and people to run that thing pretty much weekly. You're going to have to be out there cleaning that.
It's interesting. Lynn raises another great point that I the only thing park patrons have requested is garbage cans. Nothing else. I've heard that. I've heard the same thing. Yeah. I hope I'm saying that right. Any Fable writes, is the boardwalk going to be made out of wood? Why kill those trees if so? I think that one thing that we feel, that's frustrating for me as a lawyer that works in this area is all these questions are fair questions, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like there's no avenue. Like if the neighbors who are being denied access don't raise these issues, it's just the county just wants to jam this through, spend this money. It's a really troubling, it's interesting, like having this discussion with you because there's there's a sign downtown on a sandwich shop and it has 3 panels. And the first panel says, we know everything is weird and scary right now. And then the next panel says, so be nice to each other and tell people you love them. And I don't know why it makes me think, and not to get too spiritual about it, but like everything about what's happening here, it's a park, it's families, it's people walking dogs, it's nature. It's like everything about this seems wrong. Everything about this is troubling. Everything about this it's a power play by powerful people, powerful, wealthy people in a wealthy gated community who, one thing I would say is, when you think about it, it's not like that community's been there for 100 years. The guardhouse has been 100 years and the neighbors are coming in there and drinking on Saturday mornings and running dune buggies or something, right? This is families walking dogs.
Basically a passive park.
It's a passive field. I mean, that's, again, I go back to that, and it's a raw piece of land. And then you go to, there's a concept in the law that you're not allowed to move to a nuisance. So the idea is, the little village starts and there's a pig farm 20 miles away. Well, the little town grows, and the next thing you know, a developer's right next to the pig farm, and then the developer's like, we got to get rid of that pig farm. And the idea is you can't move to a nuisance and then say like, oh, I don't like the smell of that. And this smacks a little bit of that also, where you have, they moved into that neighborhood, they put up a guard gate, and now they don't want other people coming in. And there is a troubling aspect to that about being a good neighbor, right? Mm-hmm. And there is an aspect of walling ourselves off from other people, right? Instead of saying, like you said, this is a public street, this is a public park. I think that's one of the things that raises a lot of people's ire is this is a public park. This is ours, right? It's not like we're asking for something. It's like, this is ours. This belongs to us. And somebody is making a unilateral choice to deny us access and say, now you're going to access this piece of land that you have accessed for 50 plus years in a certain way. And no one's really given a good reason why we have to shut that. I've heard talk that they're saying, the reason they have to, that was always intended as a service entrance. Right. But of course, that's not what it's always been, right? I mean, my understanding is it was platted as a road to begin with. I don't think it was ever really a service entrance.
On old maps, it has a name, I believe. I can't swear to that, but I recall seeing something on that actually on old maps, it actually has a name, whether it's an extension of schoolhouse or what, but it's actually a street, is what I heard on old maps.
Well, it's interesting. One other question that Lynn raises is who's going to oversee the increased traffic on Old Cutler? Are we going to need more police presence? It seems, Lynn, that every aspect of this requires more people, more. It's like this last green, this is moving away from a nature preserve in a field into something much more formalized, more structured. And you do it, and he says again exactly. The beauty comes from it being a passive, natural, grassy field. You can't improve that. Oh, yes, they can. Yes, they believe they can. They definitely think that they can improve this space, and they're going to do it whether you like it or not. I'd recommend everyone reach out to their elected officials. I know you're frustrated on that also. You guys have gotten no response from anybody.
Zip. A little bit of lip service here and there, and that's been it.
Like they're just moving full speed ahead.
Yeah.
Every indication is they don't care. No one cares.
They don't care. They did make the mistake of sending one of us an email where they copied somebody in on there, and they're saying, "Oh, here's another email. Somebody else bugging us about the park." I mean, they're obviously annoyed that we're interfering with whatever their plan is. It's a public park. You're spending public money to quote unquote improve a public park. Where are the public records of that? Show them to us. Show us what's been done. You don't want to have another meeting because let's go back to baseball again. They already got 2 strikes. They know if they have a third meeting, 3 strikes, they're done. This is why they're pushing it through.
Yeah, they're not going to. I mean, they're going to do everything they can to avoid that meeting because people are worked up now, right?
Well, and an HOA is going to come in there because we have members in our groups that are HOA members that are absolutely aghast that their HOA
that what
is
their
doing
own
this.
Their own HOA is doing this. That's an interesting. Cindy, thank you. Cindy Lerner, thank you for writing in. She says, why won't Raquel Regalado, the new county commissioner for District 7, respond to the pleas of the park addicts for both Chapman Field and West Mattheson? It was a priority for me when running for District 7. I'd have made sure the Parks Department stopped and listened. Constituents should be putting on some strong political pressure. Don't let her treat her constituents this way. It's just because the previous commissioner, Xavier Suarez, ignored the parks and constituents. Demand better. There's a little bit of pushback on Cindy's response, only that and sheer frustration of Debbie saying, like, why isn't there a meeting with the mayor and commission? She won't reply. She doesn't care. How can you demand when they won't respond? And I think that is, I think that's where this is going to go is like, there's ways to force people to respond, right? There's lawsuits, there's things that have been filed, documents that have been produced. I mean, there's active lawsuits going on. And I think that some of that stuff will get shaken out. And I think that at the end of the day, there is an aspect of this is supposed to look a certain way, right? We have laws, we have due process, and things could be done politically. It kind of goes back to what I was saying is we can't, I think the answer to all of those questions is we can't stop. If our elected officials want to spend $30 million to build a 1/4-mile tunnel under US 1, we can't stop that, right? That is in their power to do it. But there still are processes they have to follow, including ADA accessibility, complying with environmental laws, things like that. And I think that, from everything we're seeing, the county is not doing this the right way, if that makes sense. Like the first thing that came to everyone's attention was Durham sending an email to the county saying, what are you doing? Like, why have you not gotten these permits? And they seem to be fixing that. But just like every step of the way is a stumble, a misstep. And, maybe the county gets it right in the end and kind of squeaks across the finish line with this. But, this pushing back, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. If Julie, You know, if they won't listen, they won't listen, and you go to the courts and you try to get what you can. But it is upsetting to even have this conversation, right? Like, why, you know, it's, I've said this often. It's like, what are we at? Like, where residents are going to have to hire lobbyists to lobby their own elected officials. And this has that feeling, right? No one can get a meeting. No, Debbie Perez says, why can't you say anything about getting a meeting with mayor and commission? Those meetings are refused.
Yeah, they won't meet with us.
They're not going to meet with the residents. There's something going on where those meetings will not happen. And everyone needs to reach out. Everyone needs to express their disgust at the process. Everyone needs to express their concerns environmentally, cost-wise, all the things that we've talked about, and do your best to get that out. And then, you know, I think soon there'll be an opportunity where everyone's going to go in front of the commission and just say, guys, you got to listen to us. You know, you're all here. And I think I will close with this. To the other commissioners, I really want you to, I think that Raquel and the mayor are not going to listen to these concerns because they've heard the concerns. They're not reacting to it. There are 11 other commissioners who need to hear this and need to hear this interview and say, we sure could use that $6 million to do X, get people vaccinated, to get people back on track with jobs, to deal with unpaid rent and evictions. It just seems like there's so many things we could do with this. Like, it's almost like we have to go outside of our elected officials, our immediate elected officials, and get somebody else in the government to focus on this. They don't need this in Southern Dade. Keani McGee, you couldn't use $5 million. You know, Oliver Gilbert, you couldn't use $5 billion. These people need help. They don't want this money spent. It's almost like somebody wrote, who wrote the, I would encourage everyone to read, who wrote the column in Gable's Insider?
Niels.
I would encourage everyone to look at that essay. I'll get it up on here. And it's like, how often do you end up where residents don't want you to spend $5 million on them? Yeah. And that should be a wake-up call for every elected official. When you have constituents saying, don't spend that money here, that is a highly unusual circumstance. So you asked the question, does the county commission meeting have a time set aside for citizens to speak where we can all plan to just show up and force them to hear us? Yes, you'll be hearing more about that. I think that's what's going to be forced to happen. And it's an interesting problem, not to get into the weeds, but you know, this is, how do you, you know, a lot of times, a lot of local governments have a time where, for example, Miami Beach, you can speak at a certain time on pending agenda items. And then there's a separate time for things that are on the agenda. And the county doesn't have that. And it's going to be interesting to see how that process works, where everyone gets together and just shows up and says, no, you're going to hear us out. It happened with the Wawa in Coral Gables. You know, I think 40 parents showed up and just said, no, like, it's not on the agenda. And it's not on the agenda because you secretly approved this. Right. I mean, so you have to hear us. And I think that this is a very similar circumstance. This is not on the agenda because none of these concerns are being addressed by anybody, and you're going to hear us. And so I would throw that out there, that I really would encourage. It's kind of a weird circumstance, like to beg other commissioners to see what's happening, to say, come help us, come take this money away because we don't want it spent here.
Yeah. You could drive all over town. There's plenty of places that could use the money spent on their facilities. I drive into some of the lower income neighborhoods on a daily basis. Some of the parks there are disturbing to look at. They need money. They need repairs. They need improvements. They're begging for it and they're not getting it. I look at that, and like I say, it's almost on a daily basis. I look at that and I go, I got $6 million. What do you want me to do to this park? This park could be wonderful. It could be usable again. You've got a park that's dangerous. Half the facilities are broken down and worn out and it's dangerous. You need the money here. Here's 5 million, 6 million, whatever this number is, that, you know, that they really won't give us a firm concrete number. It varies, like you said earlier. Here it is. Fix up this park.
It's almost like, you know, what's interesting you say that is this idea, you know, I just thought of is that you'd almost have to put in to discipline our elected officials, you could almost put in something that says like, oh, you can start doing these needless pet projects for political contributors once all the parks are functional. Right. Like I see that in the city of Miami when I'm a big advocate of swimming lessons. So it's like, it's very frustrating when you see a pool getting renovated when Varick Park, an African-American neighborhood, doesn't have a functional pool, right? Like that's not
decades. That pool's been gone
forever. And so the idea is like not another penny gets spent anywhere else until these African-American communities have a functional pool. So I think there's a little bit of an aspect of this of you have right next door a park that's not functional, Chapman Field. But even within this same park, remember, this is Mattheson Park. We talk about West Mattheson. It's all one park. There are broken things that need to be repaired in East Mattheson that they're not using. It's almost like we need a rule. It's like once you fix everything, we can then discuss this useless project that no one wants, and put the discipline to them. So you've got me agitated, Scott.
I'm sorry about
that. I need to take my blood pressure medicine
today.
But all kidding aside, I mean, there's just, I don't know how people wouldn't be agitated by this. It's just, if you're an advocate for good government, if you're an advocate for public participation, if you're an advocate for responsive government, this fails on every level of good governance. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, it's exactly it. On either side, you have to look at it as a total failure. If you're watching your government and what they're spending and what they're doing, and you're part of that process, you should be appalled. If you're against this, you should be appalled. Nobody wants it, like you said. It doesn't need to happen. There's no reason for it to happen, and it is destroying a prime.
If you're an environmentalist, you shouldn't like this.
The Durham reports are disturbing. I mean, where they're getting in, they're telling them you've destroyed plants. You've destroyed valuable plants already. Endangered plants have been destroyed out there.
Think about it. If you're a mobility advocate, if you're a disability advocate.
Who was the guy in Cutler Ridge for years? The gentleman in the wheelchair down in Cutler Ridge, the mobility advocate. Had all the sidewalks.
Tommy, fact checker Tommy.
Had all the sidewalks redone on US 1. He passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, we need him to show up, and they explain, well, here's what we're going to do. Unfortunately, an 18-year-old kid's going to lift you out of your car, throw you in a golf cart. I mean, it's so frustrating. I mean, it really is. Just
and 10 minutes later, you have to go to the bathroom after they dropped you off.
There's no bathroom. There's no ADA compliant bathroom.
Come get me, please.
I hate to laugh. I mean, we shouldn't be laughing. It's just horrible.
You have to laugh sometimes.
Ugh.
Unfortunately, you have to laugh.
I hate leaving interviews like this just angry and mad, but maybe that's, listen, you can't change how you feel. Like, I think that people should be mad. People should advocate. And I would encourage everyone should just write an email right now to Raquel and honestly to the mayor. I would say to the mayor, who I like very much, this is just a failure of leadership. Sometimes you need people to step in and say, what are we doing here? And I think that Daniela has a lot on her plate right now. And again, I go to this thing, it's like, we're arguing over a park. We have huge issues in Miami-Dade. But this comes down to money that shouldn't be spent, right? It's like, yes, you should focus on this, take this money and use it to solve those problems instead of a problem that doesn't exist.
I have 90-year-old relatives I can't get vaccines for, and we're going to spend $6 million on a park. Excuse me. I have a problem with that.
Yep.
You're right. You're 100% correct. There are so many other more pressing issues that they could use this money for. It's a travesty.
Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for the participation on the public comments. Please share this interview with your friends. Let's do a call of action. Let's try to leave the world a better place. I think that part of the frustration with this is like this whole project is making the world a worse place on so many levels, and it's worth our time and effort to try to bring attention to it and hope somebody looks at this and just puts the brakes on it. I mean, that's what needs to happen. The brakes need to be put on this, and it needs to be reassessed, and we need somebody in county government to do that. And if they can't, we're gonna have to force it through a lawsuit. And it's just a shame that people are having to spend their mental energy on this at this point. And also, I want to advocate this. No one's saying that this pandemic's going to end, this spring, and they're going to shut a park, right? I mean, that's one thing we haven't talked about, and we got to go. But they're shutting a park in the middle of a pandemic, on top of everything else.
Right. One of the few places you can get out where there's plenty of room to social distance because you're not walking down a 4-foot wide park
boardwalk.
You can social distance out there. Get out, get in the sunshine, enjoy Florida for what it is.
All right, do your magic, listeners. Reach out, make your voice heard. Let's see if we can make a turn on this. Thank you. Thanks for talking with me, Scott.
Appreciate it.